Hi guys, welcome to my Lightwave Genoma rigging tutorial. So what is Genoma rigging? Well, Genoma rigging are presets that allow us to create skeletal structures to move and animate our 3D objects. Now before we get started, I've created some content that I've made available for download, and there'll be a link in the description. Now inside that content we have some scenes I created that I'll be covering in the tutorial. We also have some objects that go along with those scenes. I've also created a bunch of Genoma presets that I'll be using as examples in the tutorial, and if you like you can copy this folder and paste it into the Genoma default presets location so you can load them up and take a closer look as we go along. The default presets location is in your Lightwave installation, which is generally found in C, Programs, New Tech, Lightwave 11.5 and later. And if we double click on the support Genoma rigs, this is where you'll find the default presets that come along with the Lightwave installation. Paste a folder here and the presets will be available in the Genoma presets panel in Modeler. As well as that, I've created a menu branch of all the tools that I use when rigging, all located in one easy to select menu rather than jumping from one tab to another looking for tools. Now to install the menu, launch Modeler, go to Edit, Edit Menu Layout, or alternatively you can hit Alt F10, right click on the main menu, import menu branch, navigate to where you've saved the content, select the file and hit Open. Now we have all the tools in one location for easy picking. Hit Done. Now one last thing before we get stuck into the tutorial, I'll be covering some examples of rigging with some free objects that I downloaded. If you like, you too can download these objects from this website, TF3DM, and use my Genoma presets to follow along and see how they work. Or if you like, you can download any other object and have a go at rigging it. Now before we take a look at the presets panel, we need to understand some terms, FK and IK. FK stands for forward kinematics and IK stands for inverse kinematics. Let's take a look at an example of that. If I select the arm controller located at the wrist and move it around, the whole bone structure moves along with it automatically according to the rotation limits that are set up for it to behave like an arm or a leg would. This is IK, inverse kinematics. Now if we were to select a bone or control for a bone and rotate or move that manually, that would be FK, forward kinematics. Now that we have that out of the way, let's take a look at the Genoma presets panel. Now by default the presets come with two folders, complex rigs, which consists of bipeds, two legs like a human, insects, multiple legs like a spider, and quadrupeds, which have four legs like a cat or a dog. The other folder is the rig parts, which consists of connectors and subrigs, which when combined allow us to create our complex rigs like the presets I just mentioned. I'll be going over each one of these groups in more detail. Before I do, we need to have a look at what a subrig is and how it works. At the same time, take a look at the color coding of these subrigs and what we can and can't do with them. If we take a look at this rig, which I've edited for this example, you can see that it's made up of a root. We have a few single and 4-bone FK control subrigs for the spine, arm and leg. Each one of these is a subrig, and we have the magenta connectors to do exactly that. They connect the subrigs together. We're not limited to just using connectors. We can also use Skelegons to make connections and extend our rigs. The first and most important rule of working with subrigs is that the parts that go together to make up a subrig cannot be deleted or detached. Doing this will just break the subrig. Regarding the color coding, every subrig has a blue bone, and it's considered the base of the subrig or the parent of the bone hierarchy. And the point at the base of the blue bone is used to weld to the magenta connectors, which are attached to the rest of the complex rig. Each base bone has an orange bone at the tip along with an adjustable control null. The blue bone is set up to follow that null when the rig is created in layout. The white bones are the children of the blue base bones. They are set up via the orange bone at the tip of each one of those white bones to follow the blue bone base or the blue base bones control null. You can see these settings in the motion options of each of the bones when you're in layout once the rig has been created. Now sub-rigs have a special orange connector that are attached at the tip of each bone, be it blue or white. These connectors can be used to connect to other sub-rigs as well as Skelegons, and the reason they are special is that they have embedded in them information relating to the FK and IK chains when the rig is created in layout. Now without them, the information for that rig is lost and the process can't be completed, so the sub-rig won't work. Do not delete these connectors. Now the magenta or pink bones are the connectors, and as the name implies, they're used to connect sub-rigs to each other. Next to that, we have all these green arrows and boxes that are attached to the tip of each bone. These elements are the pitch, rotation, alignment, and adjustable control. Now what that means is the orientation of these objects determines the direction of how the bone will rotate in layout. All these green arrows are all the same. The only difference is that the arrows with the boxes allow us to adjust its size, whereas the arrows without the boxes are automatically calculated for us. The controls are simple nulls with item shapes set up to drive the bones. I'll show you more on that later. And the red lines that are coming from the sub-rigs are the parenters. Now the tip of those lines are welded to the tip of a connector, so when that connector moves, the now child object moves with it. They're found on arms, the head, as well as muscles and tendons. Let's take a look at the arm parenters. Now the two parenters on the arms relate to the pole vector or the elbow control null and the IK arm controller respectively. Let's take a look at how these work when they're not attached. Now if I select the root null and move it around, you'll notice that the pole vector here, the elbow control, and the IK arm control stay exactly where they are. Now if we grab the tips of both of these parenters and weld them, I'm going to weld them to the tip that comes straight out of the root, so that when I move the root, the pole vector and the IK controller move with the root. So I just select that and hit Control W to weld it. Okay, I'll save that. If we go back to layout and update the rig, now if I select the root and move it around, you'll notice that our pole vector moves along with it, as well as the IK arm control. But if I select another controller further on, you'll notice now that it's moving around and our controllers for pole vector and our IK are not. So it all depends where you weld the parenters to. That'll depend on what actually moves it. Now let me just show you really quickly if you want to detach these parenters and maybe parent them to a different part of the rig. What you do is you select that point. Let's just zoom in. Now that point is attached to the tip of a connector and the base of an FK controller, so it won't break any sub-rig if we unweld it. So what we'll do is we'll unweld that. Now the next step is, well, let's just have a quick look. We've got 4 points, so it's unwelded. Next step is to go into polygon mode and select one of the, or actually we can select both of the parenters and select our drag tool and drag them away. Maybe select them individually and split them. Okay, now we need to go back and deselect the points, go back to the points that we unwelded, and you can see here we've got 2 points, so we'll just weld them up, and now the rig's all good and ready to go, and we can now then grab these points and either just move them out of the way or parent them to some other part of the rig. Okay, so you just make sure that you don't delete them, because if you delete them it breaks the sub rig of the arm. Now let's take a look at loading our presets and editing them and working with them. So if we go to our Genoma presets and we choose rig parts, let's just choose a connector and hit OK. Now what we can do is we can use all the modeler tools. Now in polygon mode we can select it, we can hit T and we can move it around, we can hit Y and we can rotate it. We could also hit the hotkey of R, or the shortcut of R, while we have the mouse pointed over the area we want it to rotate. If you look down here, we've got the action center is mouse. Okay, and I'm just putting it over the area that I want and hitting the letter R, the hotkey of R. What we can also do is change it to selection, and if we hit the R, it rotates around itself. Now if we want to center up any bones or any kind of a hierarchy that is supposed to sit right in the middle, we can select those points, hit V, set it on the X axis and hit OK, and it'll center it. Now what we can also do is we can go into point mode, and we can select the points and hit shift and select them, and we can move them around. We can grab our drag tool and drag our points around. We can drag selected points around. Okay, we can scale it by hitting H, or we can do shift H to constrain the proportions. So we can pretty much work with these how you would work with any other object in here in Lightwave. So I'll just grab those points, hit V. Now here's something that you're probably not aware of, and I only just discovered it. We can select that bone and hit split skelegon and just keep doing it, and it doesn't break the structure at all. Now when it comes to actually loading in our parts, to speed things up, what we can do is we can actually just select the part that we want and Control C to copy and Control V, and while it's still selected, don't deselect it, and we can move it around. Alternatively, if we want to detach a connector or a bone from the rest of them, there's two ways to do that. You can either select the points and go to unweld, and now if we select it, we can move it. But the quickest way to do it is to select your bone, Control X to cut, Control V, and then move it. Simple as that. Now when it comes to welding, what we need to do is we need to select the point that we want to move first, and then select the point of the destination, and then hit Control W. Select the point we want to move, select the destination, and up here we've got weld. Now something really important to keep in mind when connecting bones to subrigs, let's just copy this, Control C, Control V, and I'm just going to rotate it. If you select these points and weld them, it might look like these bones are connected, and if we move them around, they are connected, but once they're created in layout, they will be detached. It's super important. Control X, Control V. It's super important to make sure that when you're welding or connecting or joining anything, that the tip must be welded to the base. So we have the base of the bone, which is a thicker end, and we have the tip, which is obviously the thinner end. So the tip must always be welded to the base. Now if we've got a few bones, a few connectors, we can, without any problems, just keep adding and adding and adding, having them more connected and having as many subrigs as we want coming off them. Now that we know how to work with these connectors, how do we work with subrigs? Now when it comes to subrigs, let's just weld these two together. When it comes to subrigs, like I mentioned earlier, all the subrigs are connected at this base point to other connectors. Control W. Okay, so now let's just say you're not happy with this arm, or for example, inadvertently you chose one of our special orange connectors and deleted it. Now this rig's not going to work anymore, so maybe you want to change it out, or maybe you just want to use a different arm. What you need to do is you need to select everything in that arm, okay, and we can just simply delete it, making sure that we haven't left anything over. If there is something left over, it will just be a floating bone in the rig. And now what we can do is we can drop in an arm. Before we do, we're just going to make sure nothing's selected, and we'll just drop in an arm. Now the arm ends up at the origin. What you can do using our R hotkey is set it up really quick, and I do this all the time. I just go R in the back view, then in the side view I do it twice, and now we have our arm out to the right and it's facing the correct way. Now that we're in here, we can use our stretch tools, Shift H to constrain the proportions, move it down roughly to where you want it, and we'll rotate it a bit. Oh, yeah. Shift H again, and now we can go ahead and select the 2 points, weld them, and we can also select the tip of this to the base of our FK controller for our wrist, and hit Control W. Now it's probably messed up because I haven't got the arm positioned correctly, so we can just get in there and select all those bones in polygon mode. Normally I'm doing this in point mode because it allows you to grab a couple of points at once, hit T, move it around so that you can position it to fit with your mesh, and it avoids missing grabbing stuff too. One other thing I want to show you here is real quick is we can select these connectors here. If we go to Shift V and hit N, we can, and hit enter, we can mirror our bones. Now another way to load in our parts, connectors, presets from Genoma is if we actually select in polygon mode, select a bone, not in point mode, in polygon mode, and we open up our presets, and I'm just going to check select a connector. What you'll notice here in our preview is this white bone. Well, that white bone represents the bone that we selected, and it's showing us that the new connector that we're going to select is going to be joined to that. Now if you look up here where it says align and merge, if I uncheck align, what it does is it loads in our connector as it was positioned and saved when it was first created. But if we select align, it aligns it up to the bone that we had selected that we want the new bone to join to. The other selection we've got here is merge results. Now if you want, you can have that selected so when we select our new bone it's actually welded, but I kind of strongly recommend having that turned off. Leave align on if you want it to align, hit OK, and just go in there manually and weld it. Now I've lassoed these points, and if we look down here it says that I've got selected 2 points. This is super important, this little window down here. If you want to find out whether something is welded or not, you make a selection around it and have a look, and you can see in this case we've got 2 points, which means I need to weld it, and it's done. Now the reason I've done that, if I select a few of these bones and I go into point mode, I no longer know that my bones are selected. So if I go into the Genoma presets and I go over to the connectors, it looks like I've only got one bone selected. Now I'm not going to choose a connector, I'm going to actually choose an arm. I'm going to hit OK. Now you'll notice we've got arms coming off all of the bones that I forgot to deselect in polygon mode. Now I call this the rig killer, because if I go Control Z and keep going Control Z, it only gets rid of the last one. They're not joined, but so if they aren't joined, which is really cool, because I think I did leave merge results off, which was very clever of me, because now what I can do is just select any one of the bone subrigs and hit select connected and just delete it. Now you've heard me mention several times that we're not limited to just using connectors, that we can also use Skelegons, hence the reason why I've put them in the Genoma tab. If I select one of these connectors, what I can do is just select Skelegons. Now that that bone is selected, I can just draw Skelegons. In this case I'm just playing around making a really stupid rib cage. But now that is attached to that connector. Okay, so we'll save that. And here we are in layout. We've got our rib cage. Now if I grab a controller and move it around, those bones move around with it. And what we can do is select them and Shift V, hit N for mirror, hit enter. And what I do whenever I mirror anything, I go in and I check, and as you can see it's not anywhere near the point because the rig is not directly lined up with the center. So let's grab that and weld it. Actually I won't weld that, just in case if you miss out. Let's have a look what happens. Now if I select the controller and move it around, oh, look at that. We'll go back, we'll weld that, save it, and we'll try it now, and there we go. So like I said, we're definitely not limited to just using connectors. I mean, you could have gone ahead and made this with some active connectors, but really there's no point. Just remember, when you're connecting to any subrig, you connect to one of these orange connectors. Now let's take a look at all the different groups in the rig parts. Now if you go to the two presets that I provided and we go down, you'll see a folder here, Genoma subrigs. Click on that, and what I've done is I've taken all the parts, all the subrigs and stuff, and put them in groups and saved them out as presets. And I'll be showing you how to save presets very soon. Now if we start off with number 1, connectors and active and passive, let's open those up and have a look at them. Now with these connectors, there's two types of connectors. There's the active connectors and there's the passive connectors. Now in most of the subrigs you'll find the passive connectors. Now what does that mean? Well, what it means is that when this bone is connected to a subrig, it has a bone strength of 0. Let's take a look at these connectors in layout. Now they come in and they both look exactly the same. Just a quick tip in working here in layout, if you hit D for display and go to the general tab, what you want to do is you want to have this double click bone mode selected. What that does is that allows us to just double click anywhere onto the screen and it will swap between, if you look down here, objects and bones. If I double click, it goes to bones. If I double click again, it goes to objects. It's just a really quick way to work rather than constantly going back and forth. Now in bone mode, I've got a bone selected. I'm going to hit P for properties, for the bone properties. And if we have a look here, remembering that our top connectors here are the active ones, and you can tell that by this part here has got 2 bumps whereas our passive ones don't have any bumps at all, they're just straight. Okay, so our top ones here are our active connectors, and they come in with a strength of 100%. What that means is that when this bone is in a rig, it will have an influence on the mesh that's surrounding it. Whereas if we look at these ones down here, the passive ones, they come in with a strength of 0. They're only there just for the structure, just to connect the subrigs together. They have no influence on the mesh, nor do the special little orange ones. And when it comes to these connectors, don't be fooled by thinking that these are something special. They're just simply one connector joined together in these configurations just for our benefit. Okay, next up we'll go back into the presets folder, Genoma subrigs, and we'll choose root and hit OK, and just have a really quick look at the root. Now the root is extremely important, and it's the first bone of any complex rig. And what it does is it allows us to move the whole complex rig while our feet and arm or wrist controllers, IK controllers, remain where they are. So if you plan to animate an object and move its body around, you're going to want to start off with a root. You could also use these roots to connect a whole bunch of different things to it, just so that you've got like a master control, not necessarily the master null that everything is attached to, but a master control for your rig. Let's take a look at number 3. Our FK controllers, our forward kinematic controllers. And as mentioned before, you notice here this is a perfect representation of how the blue bones are the base of all of these subrigs, including the blue bone on its own. That is considered a subrig because it has a magic orange connector on the end, which refers to this controller here, which is a null, which we use to rotate this bone. What we've got here is we've got what looks like a whole stack of different FK controllers, but what they really are these groups here are the same. They're all the same, they just look different so that you can put them in different parts of your rig to represent different things. For example, these ones here would probably be used for the spine. Now the way these work, as I mentioned earlier, the blue bone being the base, and that blue bone is, its rotation is being controlled by this null here. It will eventually be a null. How it's set up is that this bone is following or set up same as this null. So when this null is rotated, the bone is rotating, so it's just following this null. Now when it comes to the white bones, all the white bones are also following this null. So when we rotate the base, it rotates all the other bones sequentially, enabling us to create a nice little arc. In between there, we've got our orange connectors which have embedded information, but we can connect whatever we like to those and it won't break the subrig. Whatever we connect to them will just move with the subrig. You'll notice over here that I've got this FK control set up here. We've got a single FK controller joined to a 4-bone FK controller. Now you'll find this setup in many parts of our complex rigs. Generally in the spine, you'll find them in the neck. This is a really good setup because what it does is, well, first of all, I call these the SSFK controllers, and the SS stands for stiff and soft. Now what I mean by that is when we move this bone, the rest of the bones move without any rotation. They follow directly along, whereas when we rotate this bone, when we rotate this bone here, the rest of them rotate, which makes it look all soft. Okay, here we are in layout now. Real quick, I just want to show you my SSFK controller. If I select this null, and let's just take a look at the motion properties for these nulls and for these bones. Just double click, I'm going to select that bone, controllers and limits, they're set up to follow this control, set up as same as, so whatever is happening to the controller will happen to the bone. It's as simple as that, but it gets done for us. Okay, and if we select one of these white bones, once again it's set up to follow this controller, the controller of the base bone. Okay, so now if we select, double click to get into polygon mode, and we rotate, you'll notice that we get that stiff movement. Everything's all stiff. Now if I select the soft controller, when we rotate that, it's all nice and soft. Now with regard to this SS controller, I'll be showing you how to make that, and we'll save that out as a preset. It's just good to have. Now all the rest of these just work as they would. Okay, it's just the only difference is they look different in modeler, but the only difference is that 4 bones, 3 bones, 2 bones, 1 bone. That's all it is. But let me just show you something. Well, first of all, I'll just grab all of these controllers, and not the bottom one. Hit Y for rotate, go to modify, and hit reset. Here's something I want to show you that I think really needs to be pointed out. I'm going to select this controller here, and I'm going to control the bank. Now notice how the base is rotating to the right, the rest of the bones rotate to the right. That is the correct way for it to work. If we go back to layout, we've got these green pitch controllers, okay, and like I said earlier, they determine the direction of the pitch. Right now the pitch is in the Z axis, and we move it, it moves forward and back. Now if I grab all these, and I'm going to move them in front of our FK controllers. Now I'm going to save that, and I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to update the rig. If I select one of these controllers and I go and rotate the bank, look what happens. It collapses on itself. It's doing the opposite. Rather than having the base go right, the rest of the bones go right. The base is going right, but the rest are going left, and that has to do with the direction of these little green buggers here. They're all pointing back, and our adjustable controllers are pointing forward, so they're kind of working against each other. Okay, now you may want this effect, and if you do, well, that's cool, because this is how you do it. But if you find that you create a rig and you're moving the spine, and this happens, which happened to me, depending on what you want, depends on where you place this controller. Now let me just show you what happens if we grab a controller and we move it over to the side. What that now is saying, that the pitch is going to rotate on this axis, no longer going to rotate back and forward, it's going to rotate right to left. You'll notice now that the controller has moved over, and you'll notice now, I'll select both of these, have a look at the direction of the pitch. Let's go from the top. This is the correct way because we've got it directly in front, and this is the incorrect way. It's going right to left, but then again, maybe you might want your rig to do that, and that's cool, but just be aware of it. Just be aware of how important having pitch controllers set up in modeler. Okay, it's very important. So now if I select the pitch, it's going sideways as opposed to back and forward, and this one's obviously still collapsing on itself because I haven't moved it behind. Okay, now let's take a look at creating one of those SS FK controllers. Okay, in our Genoma presets, rig parts, we'll select FK controller, we'll select the controller 01, hit OK, hit A. Now I'm going to rotate that, selection R, and F3 to center it onto the ground. Select that and go into our presets, rig parts, and we'll do a 4 bone. We'll use a 4 bone. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to back to mouse and hit R, and it's pretty much right in position, so I'm going to make sure in point mode I've got 2 points selected. I'm going to weld that together, and while I'm here I'm going to select all of them, hit V, X axis, hit OK. Now I know that they're all centered. Anyway, I'm just going to move these back. Okay, I don't need to make them big, just check that the rest of the pitch controllers are all facing the same way. Right, we're done. That is made. Now, all we do, and just save it. I'm just saving it into one of my folders here I'm using for the tutorial. Save that, and I've got that as a backup. Now I can either copy or paste that, but I'm actually just going to go in and save it again, and I'm going to save it directly into where my presets are. So hit Control S, and we'll go to rig parts, FK controllers. Now I've already got one in there, but I just stuffed up the name. Okay, so now I just changed the name back to SSFK control and just simply save it. Okay, now as far as, well, let's just take a look. If we go in here and rig parts, FK controls, and there it is right there, SSFK control. Obviously I've got other versions. It's no big deal, we can just delete that. Now if we look down here, our description just gives us the path of where it is. Let me show you how to change that. So I'll cancel that. Now here we are in Explorer. I've just navigated to where my presets are, and that's in the Lightwave installation. And if we go to rig parts, to FK control where we saved it, and here it is here, SSFK control, and you notice that all the rest of them have got texts underneath. Now the way we create those comments is, well, this is the way I do it. I select the object that I've just placed in there, and I hit F2 or right click and rename it. Now that it's selected, I just copy it, Control C, and just click away, and then right click, new text document. It's already highlighted, so I just go Control V. Now the text is named exactly the same as the object. We hit enter to accept it, and then enter to open it again, and just type away SSFK control, and then just hit or save or Control S, save it, close it. Now our text is done, and if we go over to Genoma, presets, rig parts, FK control, and we select our SSFK control, there we go, SSFK control. You can actually save polygons with these sub-rigs. I've got this muscle man which we'll be covering a bit later, but you can see it's all white. That's because I've actually got, there we go, muscle man preset chest rig has muscle presets. This also includes the mesh. Let's just say you wanted to create a really long neck. The way you'd go about that is, I've got a 4 bone FK control here. What you do is you just select it, Control C, Control V, hit T, and just move it up. We'll go in there and we'll weld the points. Let's just go do it like this. Once again, polygon mode. Just move around, Control C, Control V, hit T to move. Back up there. We'll zoom in and we'll just weld them together. And now what we've done is we've just created a really long neck, and we've got 4 controls, and it'll be all nice and bendy. Now I've created this dinosaur. Now if you want to download the object I just hid, it's called a Diplodok. I've got this Diplodok here, and I've got it here in layout. So if I go over to bounding box, I've got my object selected, set up, create rig, and here we have the rig completed. Now I really went overboard on the neck, but for demonstration purposes, here you can see, let's have a look at it with the mesh. Now I've got control of this big ass neck, and we can just move it around and animate each one of these individually. Next up, let's take a look at spines. We go to our presets, our shoot presets, subrigs. We'll choose number 4, spines, to the perspective view. Once again, much like the FK controllers, we've got the blue base with the white children. The major difference here between the FK controllers and these IKB chains, which I believe stands for Inverse Kinematics Booster, as in IK booster chains. Now, the major difference is the base bone is missing the controller. First up, you'll notice that we've got this chain here which is broken. I've had to add it in here so that the one here on the left would actually work, because for some reason it didn't like playing with the rest of them. Okay, so just kind of ignore this one here. Now the way these work, each bone has got a controller. Okay, so you can select each bone and move it individually. And we're moving it FK style here. You can just select an area of the chain, for example this area here, and just right click on it. When you right click on it, it selects the rest of the bones that are attached to it in the hierarchy, and then we can just grab that and move that around. You'll notice that there's no bank control. We've just got pitch and heading, and I got that correct this time. Okay, so that's a difference, and these ones you could also use for a neck, but I'd imagine these are mainly used for tails and stuff like that, so you can just select that and then just wiggle the tail around, animate it, and right at the bottom we've got our main FK control, and all the rest follow along the stiff sort of style. Okay, and like I said, you could just go in and animate these individually. Obviously you could attach these to a root and use them as a spine, and then just continue on with the legs and the head. If you check out some of the complex rigs, the quadrupeds, they do use this. They even use them in one of the bipeds, so it's up to you what kind of control you want. Next up, we've got the arms. So let's check out number 5, complex arm subrig. Okay. Now what I've done here is I've added a root, and I've moved the controller forward, and attached to that root is a whole bunch of connectors, and we've got all 5 of the arms. Now if we go to rig parts and go to arms, the order from top to bottom is how I've got them here. Now if I grab this root controller now and I rotate it, you can see that we've got our IK happening, which is really cool. Now what are the major differences between these 3 and these 2? Well, first up, you'll notice that in the forearm we've got 3 bones, and in the forearm here on these simple arms we've only got the 1. Now the reason for that is that these with the 3 bones are set up to have a forearm that twists. Now down the bottom, these 2 simple ones don't have that. Okay, so they're the 2 major differences. We've got the 3 arms that have got the wrist roll, and then we've got the 2 simple arms that don't. The other difference between these arms are the controllers. Now this controller here, which is tiny, is set up automatically, whereas the next 2 have options to actually make them bigger. I think you could also even do that with the wrist controllers, and there you go, you can. But if you're in a situation that you can't, well, it's pretty simple. Just select the controller, which is a null with an item shape on it. Hit P for properties. Under geometry, you've got item shape. Just double click on it. Just punch in what you want. 0.02, would that be 2 centimeters? And you're done. Just close it off. So if you can't do it by stretching it, just go into the properties and do it. Okay, so that's one of the differences. If you have a look at the simple arms, they come in automatically. Now if I grab this root control and move it around, you'll notice if we have a look at the pole vectors, the first complex arms has it set up automatically to move with the arm, whereas the next two don't. But if we look at here in Modeler, you'll notice that the two that aren't moving with the arm have options to do so via the parenting. So if I grab these two, and I'm just going to weld them to this point right here. Now we've got the parenting set up. I'll save it, and I'll have to update the rig. Okay, so I updated the rig, and now if I select the root controller and move it up and down, you'll notice now that the two arms that I just parented have the pole vector moving with them. Okay, so that's the option there. Same goes with the simple arms. You've got one that's set up to move, and you've got one that doesn't. Now, the next difference are the wrist controllers for the second and third arm. If we go back to Modeler, they too have options for parenting. So we'll select those and we'll weld them with the rest of them. And save that. Once again, if we move it around, you'll notice now that we've got the pole vectors as well as the arm controls moving with the root. Next up, we've got the legs. So let's go down and find number 6, complex legs subrigs, and load that in. Okay, let's have a look at these legs. Once again, I select the root, and if I move it up and down, you can see now that we've got our IK working on all our legs. Now if we select the controllers for the legs, we can move them around, lift them up and down. Now we've got 2 insect legs, and the difference between these two simply is that the second one has a controller attached to it, ready done for us, that you can use much like a sort of shoulder or something like that, whereas the first one doesn't. Right in the middle there, the third one is a human leg. Well, first up, we've got our foot control, which moves the whole foot. We can rotate it. Okay, we've also got the ankle. Now when we rotate the ankle, it doesn't rotate the foot control. We've got the heel, and we've got the foot roll, and my favorite, and we'll be using this later on, which is hidden right in the middle there, is our toe control. And once again, we can just go in to the item shapes, and I'm just going to change that to a box and make that 0.02 centimeters. What you could also do is you can come in here and label it. You could go L toe, and we can place that on right in the center there, or on the left or the right. So now when we deselect it, you can clearly see it now. It's a box, it's labeled, and we can select that and we can play with our toe. Now all these legs have got the pole vector, and that controls the direction of the knee. It rotates at the hip. Now the last two are our quadruped legs. The second last one here is set up to be the hind leg, and that's got a foot control and acts pretty much exactly the same as the human leg. The only difference is there's a few more bones added to suit an animal skeleton. Now this last bone is pretty much the same as the second last, however the difference is there is a twist on the ankle, and what you can do there is you can attach hands and stuff to make eagle's legs, which I did, and I've got a preset of that. I've got the hind leg, but let's just say that we need a front leg of an animal. What we can do is go back into Modeler. Now I'm going to use the human leg. I'm just going to select the points here. I'm going to go into side view, and I'm just going to grab the knee, and then just bring it back. So now what I've done is I've created the front leg of an animal. And once again, if we save that, and I come back in here, and now if we have a look, we've got the human leg, but it works just as it would, except this time it's the front leg of an animal. Okay, So don't be scared to move the knees around and stuff to create the type of structure that you need. Next up, we've got the hands. So let's load them in. It's number 7, complex hand subrigs. Now what we've got is we've got the left and right hands, and we've got 2 different versions. And really the only difference is one hand here that has controls for every joint in the hand and the fingers, whereas the one here on the left, which is slightly more common, has FK, three bone FK controllers. So we're controlling all 3 of these bones with the one controller. Now if we look over here to the left, we've got 2 fingers. Let's have a look at this order. We've got finger 1 and we've got finger 2, which is finger 1, finger 2. Now right next to it I've got a 3-bone FK controller, and you're looking at the 2 here and you're going, well, they look exactly the same, and they do. Whereas this one here on the right is a little bit more obvious to tell that it's a finger, as the tip of it tapers, whereas our FK controllers don't taper at the tip. Okay, that's one really easy way to identify that that's a finger. What is the major difference between an FK control and a finger? Well, first thing is you can see that the FK control's got a box and a sphere, whereas the fingers only have spheres. Now if I go into rotation, and if we rotate the pitch, it all works the same. We grab this one here. Oh, look at that. It's different, okay? So the fingers work differently to the FK controllers. Now if I rotate the bank on the FK controller, it rotates the whole structure, whereas if we select a finger and we rotate it on the bank, which is the blue, the finger curls over. Okay, so now if we go over to one of these hands and I select all 4 of these controllers, these 3-bone FK controllers, but finger version, and rotate the bank, now we can make a fist. And if we rotate the pitch, we can continue that fist on. Okay, so if you're going to be creating hands from scratch, just make sure that if you're going to have fingers, make sure that you use the fingers and not an FK controller. I just wanted to point it out. It's probably obvious there isn't an FK controller in the hands folder, but I just wanted to point that out, that the bank works differently for the 2 different styles of subrig. Now if we look at the hand that's got all these controllers, well, I'm rotating the bank and they all rotate together. If I rotate the pitch, you can see that it can make a fist. So it all depends on the amount of detail you need in your hands and with your fingers. Also, we've got the thumb. This is our sort of stiff setup where the whole thumb moves around, and then once again we've got the finger style where if we rotate the bank it curls around. And lastly, the wrist control, and this controls the whole hand from the wrist. Okay, it's independent from the arm control or the IK control, which also rotates the hand. So there we go. There are the 4 different hands, 2 left and 2 right, and we've got a couple of fingers here. Next up, let's take a look at the heads. Select number 8, complex head rigs. Now in here we've actually got 3 different heads, but we've also got the targeting bones. Okay, we've got some single targeting bones. This is just a regular single targeting bone, and we'll get into that in a little bit later. There's also a second version of it, however this time this one's got a parenting option, and that parenting option parents the actual controller, the null controller that you move around for this bone to actually follow. So you can have it independent or you can have it attached. And if we have a look at that over here, they've already done that for us. They've added a connector and they've taken the parenter and parented or welded it to the tip of this connector. So now that when we rotate the head via this controller here, the targeting controller will move with it, and I'll show you that in a sec. The second head is a lot more simpler, and the third head gives you the option. And then over here we've got some options to create our own eye targets that we can attach to any part of any structure. Okay, here we are in layout. Now First things first, we need to select these targets for the eyes, and I'm just going to select them and move them forward. And it's a little bit annoying, the fact that you can't adjust that in Modeler. But now what we can do, actually I'm just going to grab all of them, move them all forward. Anyway, now if we move them up and down, left to right, you'll notice that those bones follow that target wherever it goes, and you can actually split it, so you can have it move have both eyes move together, or you can select a separate one and have the eyes move separately. And then once again grab the main one and move that around. Okay, so that's how the eyes work. Now as far as the head's concerned, we've got two controllers here. It's our stiff and soft. Rotate it, the whole head moves. So this is for the neck, and we've got our soft neck, the control or a bone that operates the jaw, so you can have your character talking. And lastly, we've got the control that moves the head. You notice that the neck's not moving, just the head, and as well as that, because we've got the eye controller parented to this top bone here, the eye controller is moving with the head. And we can just grab them both and just swing his head all around. The same goes with these two, except you can see that as I'm rotating it, the eye controllers are staying where they are. Now that can be really annoying if you're doing a walk cycle and stuff like that, and you've got your character looking around a lot. So choose wisely. Next up, let's have a look at the muscles and tendons. Select number 9, and as you can see, this has got geometry saved with it. Hit OK. As you can see here on the left, the first muscle comes in as one bone, the second one as two, same with the tendons. Now let's have a look at what actually happens. If I select this controller and move it up and down, check that out. Now the muscles here on the left and the tendons on the right. The tendons are intended just to sort of keep the shape of the actual geometry as you move it up and down, not necessarily make it bulge or go all skinny like the muscles do. They're just there to sort of keep the shape. Now if you have a look at the muscle on the left, that creates one bulge. If we have a look at the muscle next to it, it creates two. So we've got two bones creating two different muscles. Now let's take a look at a real world example of how to use the muscles. Now in the tutorial presets, you've got the muscle man. What you can do is you can save this out and send it over to layout, but I've already created a scene for you in the content called Muscle Man, so that you can just check it out and have a look at the guy's chest. What I've done is I've added some muscles, the two bone muscles across his chest, connected to the orange connector that comes out from the elbow. I've just moved the tip of it up and joined a muscle to it. And here's the results. As he brings his arms down, you notice the chest flexes. As well as that, if I double click to get into bone mode and select this bone and hit the properties, what I've done for the bicep bones is I've selected muscle bulge and just cranked it up to 500%. And now when he bends his arm, you can see that we've got some muscle action. As well as if you have a look here on the left, as he moves his arm, his chest is flexing. Okay. So that's the result of it. Let's have a look at it in Modeler. Now this rig, I've got the parenting set up to the root. Let's take a look at what I've done here. This is the orange connector that usually just sits out at the back here of the elbow, and I've just simply grabbed that point and run it straight back up through the arm and attached one end of the muscle to it. And then if you have a look here, coming off the spine, one of the connectors of the spine. I've added a magenta connector. From that, I've just added 2 others to it just to create a T, and I welded my muscles to all those points, and the parenting was welded right up here to the base of the shoulder control, so that when the arm moves around, the muscle stays with the chest. But you need to remember, it's parenting, it's not targeting. These muscles are being parented to these bones, so if this whole top structure moves, the muscles will move with them. If it was parented to the arm, whenever the arm moved, these would try to move with it, okay? So that's how we use the muscles, and as you can see, I've just added some ribs in there as well. Now that we've attached the muscles to the rig, we need to tell those muscles which part of the mesh we want them to affect. So what I've done is I've created a weight map specifically for that chest area, so that now when those muscles or those bones move, they only affect this area. Next up, let's take a look at number 10, Control Symmetry 01. This is a symmetrical controller. You can find that in the FK controllers right down the bottom. Now this is a clever little device. How it's set up is we've got one controller that controls both sides. You would use this in a setup for wings, or something that you need to move symmetrically by just moving the one controller. You have both sides moving simultaneously. So let's load that up and have a look. Now if I select that controller and go into the rotate and rotate in the pitch, you can see that they're both moving at the same time. Same as in the heading and in the bank, they rotate. Now speaking of wing setups, let me show you my wing setup. Inside the Tute preset folder, if we go down, I've actually got 2 rigs here. I've got the Eagle Wings and Eagle Rig. Now let's check out the first one. So what I've got is I've got the symmetrical controller, and to that I've added a 3-bone FK control on either side. Now the big controller here controls the flapping of the wings, but these 2 controllers here for the 3-bone FK controllers control the bending of the wings. And to all that, I've got attached a whole stack of Skelegons that conform to the shape of the eagle. Let's take a look at the other one. This one's a slightly more advanced version. What I've done with this one is I've just split some of the Skelegons and removed them and replaced them for single FK controller. So now I've got control of the legs. It's pretty simple control of the legs. I've got control of the tail, and I've got control of the wings bending and flapping, as well as up at the front here I've got control of the head. Okay, so I've got those presets saved out for you so you can check them out. If we go back to that website, TF3DM, once again, and just by the way, I have no affiliation with these guys. Anyway, if you type in Eagle-2 or Eagle-2, if you download the Eagle and load my Genoma rig, Eagle rig, it'll fit perfectly. Well, here's the animation that I created of the eagle. I'll just play that for you. And it's a loop cycle. Didn't intend for it to be, but it just ended up like that. I'm just moving it around. And you can see just from controlling a few controllers that we're getting this really detailed wing flapping action. And you can see in the back we've got the tail working as a rudder. We've got the legs bouncing up and down. Okay, this is the front view. Here's another example of using the Symmetrical FK controller. Now, download yourself a skeleton from that website if you like. And in the presets, I've created a sub-rig for the skeleton, and I've added some ribs in there. So check that out. Let's have a look at it in layout. Now if I select this controller here and go into the rotation and rotate up and down, you can see I've got ribs moving, breathing. So that's a pretty cool thing. Before I show you how that works, have a look at the shoulder control. Have a look over here, you've got the shoulder blade. And as I move the shoulder control around, we're moving the arm and the shoulder blade and the collarbone. I mean, I'm not sure if the collarbone's moving how it's supposed to, but just thought I'd show you that. Now let's take a look at it. Okay, first up, I want to get rid of this mesh so we can have a look at the skeleton. Quickest way to do that, if you go to your polygon statistics, and you can switch between polygon, points and edges with your spacebar. Where it says Skelegons, just press the plus, and that selects all the Skelegons, and then we'll press the plus key to hide the unselected bits in the layer. You can see here that I've joined the symmetrical controller to one of the connectors here on the spine. I've positioned the FK controllers, and I've added some Skelegons to fit with the ribs. I've also added some of these orange ones here to keep the sternum from moving. So that's it, and I just moved the controller to the front so I can select it much easier. And there we go. As well as the shoulders, I've added a few bones here for the collarbone and for the shoulder blade. I've just welded them to the tip of the shoulder controller, so they move along with that shoulder controller. Just real quick, I'm not sure if I pointed out earlier, but you notice how I've got different color bones in here. Well, that's the reason why I put this sketch color tab in here. You just select the bones you want to change the color of, hit sketch color, and just choose whatever color you want. Blue. There you go. So you can just go around changing the colors to suit your rig. Now, if you've ever wondered, where do I move the joints when I use one of these presets with one of my biped objects? Where do I move all the knee joints? Well, the best way to see how that works is to use a skeleton, download one of the skeletons and fit one of the presets to it, and you'll soon find that these presets were modeled on a human skeleton, as you would, I guess. You can see all the joints of my skeleton meet up with the joints of the human skeleton. Got the hip. I've got all these bones through here. I've added a couple of bones just for this part of the pelvis. We've got our spine. Let me get rid of these. Just select them and hide the selected. Alright, and then go up to the arms, the elbow. And what's really cool is you get a really good representation of all the hand bones in the Genoma rigs and how they fit with a skeleton. Also the neck and the head all fit pretty cool. Let's have a look if we can see it. Not really. This mesh is just way too heavy. So grab yourself a skeleton, throw one of the presets in there, and use the skeleton as a guide. And that way when you're rigging one of your own characters, you've got a good idea as to where to position all the different joints. Here's something else that you might find interesting. If I go to an empty layer and put my skeleton in the background, if I go to create and go to create a box, I'm just going to create a box that's exactly the same height as our character here. I'm going to select it, and if I rotate it now, you'll find that the arm length is the same distance. Well, here it's a tiny little bit longer, but generally the arm length is the same distance as the height. Now earlier we touched on targeting when we had a look at the head rigs. If you look in the content, in the objects folder of your content, we've got two targeting excavator arms, complex and simple. Load those up. As well as that, in the scenes, I've got an excavator arm complex scene. So load that up. Here's the scene. If I press play, just made a loopable animation just to show you how the mechanical arm moves and the hydraulics are working along with it. So I'll show you how we use targeting to get that to work. Now back in Modeler, this is the complex arm. Each one of these parts has got a weight associated to it. Now the setup is much like Lino's video on the Lightwave YouTube channel, where he rigs that mechanical robot arm. Same sort of process. Create weight maps for each one of the parts. And if we go into the wireframe, check this mess out. It is definitely a mess, but it's a very well organized mess. But I'm not actually going to break this down for you. I've created a simple version of it, which is pretty much the same thing, except I've gotten rid of the bucket and the other two hydraulics, and we'll just concentrate on how this works. And it still kind of looks like a bit of a mess, so I've created this one. Now you can see that we've got the big arm, which is blue, and we've got the female or the outer hydraulic as well, which is blue, which is part of this arm. And we've got the green part, and up the top we've got the extension for the hydraulics. And the way these hydraulics work, if you're interested, is that we've got oil coming in, high pressure oils coming in, or some sort of a liquid, which pushes this rod in and out, which then makes this arm pivot. Okay, so it's sort of good to know how the mechanics work, so when you go to rig it, you know what you have to do. We've got a pivot down here at the bottom, and we've got a pivot here. So have a look at let's have a look at the base rig. We've got an FK controller, and I've just selected them and sketch colored them just so you can see what's going on. But I've got an FK controller down here, which controls the whole arm, and then we've got another pivot up here which controls the smaller arm. Now what I've done is I've extended, well, let's turn it on. I've extended this green arm with a connector and attached to it a target bone. I've also done that with the blue section coming off one of the connectors. I've added another connector and welded a target to it. Okay, so if we look at them together, it looks like a bit of a mess, but there's some method to the madness here. Let me explain. When you use one of these targets and it gets created in layout, this controller here gets converted into the target, like the one we saw with the eyes, and it sits right here at the tip of the target. Okay, I'm having these bones target both ends of the hydraulics pivot. So this bone here, which is attached to the small arm, the bone will move with the small arm. However, the actual controller or the target is parented to the blue arm. So the target moves with the blue arm, the big arm. Okay, the actual target of the target bone moves with the big arm, but is attached to the green, as well as having one attached to the blue and having its target parented to the green. I hope that makes sense. Hopefully this will make a lot more sense. Okay, so if we select this controller here, I'll just turn off the heading and the bank, because this mechanical arm only moves in a rotation. The pivot down here would move in the heading. So if I move this controller up and down, I've got them both selected actually, you'll see that the whole arm moves. Okay, if I select this controller, we've got the front of the arm. Now if you have a look at our target, as this rotates, you can see that the bone, our target bone, is moving or rotating, moving with the rotation of the small arm. And what it's doing, it's targeting this. Okay, it's looking at that. So it doesn't matter where it is, it's looking at that. And it'll always look at that and try to point to it. That's the reason why the target for the small arm bone is parented to this big arm. If I move the big arm now, see, this target's moving with it. But in Modeler, what I've done, just to speed things up, is I've just placed it right there. Normally, if you don't resize the target, these things will sort of end up in the middle, and then you just got to move them out yourself. Okay, but why do it twice? Why not just set it up? Now, one other thing, if we've got all these really big fat bones, if we hit display, we go to display handles and icons. There's a few things we can do in here. We can change the bone size. Okay, we can make them wireframe, and that way they're not so obvious. Now, one last example of using the target bones, if we go to the Genoma presets, shoot presets, you'll see I've got a preset called belly. Load that in. If you have a look at it, it reminds me of a motorbike. Anyway, this is the spine of a quadruped. I've just detached the legs and I've added my belly. I've got a connector here, and attached that is a target bone, and that's parented. The target is parented to the tip of this FK controller, same as this one here. It's attached to one of the orange connectors on the spine, and once again, its target controller is parented to the tip of this FK controller. So what that means is that each target null from these target bones move with this FK controller, and in between the FK controller and the target are some tendons which are parented to each part of the spine. So when this spine moves around, these these tendons will move around with it, as well as these with the rear end. So let's take a look at it in layout. Now I've got it set up here on my Diplodok, okay, my dinosaur. Now if I show you this little animation of him standing up, you can see that the whole belly and that's getting stretched. So if you didn't have anything in there, all those polygons would be stretched, but if you had a stiff bone in there, then that bone wouldn't move and the rest would stretch. Whereas here now, I can select this FK control and I can move it about to adjust the belly. And if you have a look at these targets, they end up at the tip, but they are parented to this tip. So as I move the belly, the target bones are accommodating that movement. You can wobble his bellies from side to side. So this can help out in animating one of your quadrupeds. I've also got it set up on my character for its belly, so I can make it bounce up and down. So that's just another use of using the target bones to help improve your complex rig. In this next section, what I'm going to do is take this character and I'm going to rig it with a really simple rig, and I'll speed it up so you don't have to sit through it. When we come back, we'll talk about setting up some weights and assigning bones to these weight maps. Okay, now that we have our rig completed, let's go ahead and set up some weight maps. So what I'll do first is I will actually change the sketch color so that it makes it easier for us to see. So I'm going to grab the polygons on the head, and over here in the Genoma tab under weight maps, you'll see new weight map. Select that and type in head. If you hit enter, it accepts it, but it closes off that little dialog, so you can just hit create and leave it open. So now that I've got that head selected, I'm going to minus it to hide the selected, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. I'm going to turn symmetry off, and I'm going to grab this left arm, including all the bits, and go new weight map, and I'm going to type in the object first, or the part of the body first, arm underscore left. That way when we go and set up the bones, we can find all these names alphabetically. So I'll hit create, and I'll minus that. Same for this side. And while the dialog window's open, we can just type in, swap the L for the R, hit create, minus that. Let's grab the body here. Yeah, that'll be fine. We'll call that body. Hit create, minus that. Got that whole side. We're going to call that leg underscore left. Hit create, minus that. Select the rest and call it create. And we can close that off. Unhide everything. We'll go into weight shade now, and let's go through it. We've got our arm left, arm right, body, head, leg left, and leg right. Okay, so that's done. The next step is to select our Skelegons, putting our mesh in the background as a reference, and now we'll go ahead and we will assign weight maps to these bones, or associate these bones to control only the weight maps that we've created. Well, before we go ahead and do that, I intentionally selected the whole hand as well when I chose the arm, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to show you how we go about editing weight maps. Now say you've done what I've done and you've selected the whole arm, and now you're thinking, well, hang on, I want to separate the hand. Now rather than going in and deleting that whole arm and doing it again, what we can simply do is we can select the hand. Okay, it might be a little bit hard to see here, but we've got the hand selected. Now what we want to do is remove the weight map from this part of the hand. So we've got our arm left selected. Now the second tab here under new weight map is set map value. So new weight map is used to create a new weight map. Set map value is used to edit that weight map. So we've got the arm left weight map selected. I've got the polygons that I don't want to have that weight map on them, and I'll set them to a value of 0. If it was 100%, obviously the weight map would stay there, but since it's 0, it's going to get rid of it. So we've just removed this part of the hand from the arm left weight map. Okay, so now that we've got these polygons selected, we can just go to create new weight map and call it hand underscore left, and we can create that. Okay, so now we've got two weight maps, two separate weight maps, and we're going to have to do the same for the other side. And we don't have to rewrite it because I've got it here, hand left, and just change it to hand right and create. Okay, so that's how we edit our weight maps, how we create weight maps and how we edit them. Now the way we go about associating these bones or assigning these bones to the weight maps is very simple. You can do it in layout by choosing the bones, opening up the properties of the bones, and then choosing the weight map. But why would you want to do that? I mean, if you're creating a rig or creating an object with a rig and you're passing it on to an animator, then you want to have everything all done and saved with the object. Okay, so when you load it in, every time you create the rig, these bones will be assigned to the chosen weight maps, as opposed to having to go through and do it all manually. Now the way we do it, it's pretty simple. Here I've got a tab called Set Skelegon Weight. We choose the bones that we want to associate to a weight map. Now when you're choosing your bones, you remember that the connectors, the orange connectors and the pink connectors, have no influence over the mesh, so selecting them and assigning them to a weight map is useless, unless of course you're using a connector that's active. Okay, so when you're selecting the bones to assign to weight maps, you really only need to select the blue, the white, any Skelegons that you've created, and active connectors. Okay, so now we're going to do the arm. I'm just going to select these two, I'm not going to worry about the others, and hit Set Skelegon Weight, and then we've got the choice here of what weight map we want these to be a part of. So in this case, arm left, we'll select that, hit OK. So now when we check, you'll see that these two bones are assigned to drive or to influence the arm weight map. Okay, and what also I like to do is, once I've done that, I've selected them, I just like to hide them so we don't have to worry about them. Now for the hand, I'm just going to select the whole lot and set that to hand left. Okay, now what I've done is I've created a hotkey for Set Skelegon Weight, and that is the U key. Okay, I haven't got anything selected, but let's just hide this. Let's do the other arm. We'll grab those two. I hit U, brings up Set Skelegon Weight, and choose arm right, hit OK, minus it, once again hand right. Okay, let's just go up here now and we'll grab these and we'll assign all these to the body. And we can assign that one too. I'm not sure if that comes in active or not. And choose body, hit OK, minus that. Now we'll come up here to their head, we'll select the blue and white. Oops. Okay, so I've just selected the bones. Obviously if you had a jaw, you would be assigning this bone here to a jaw, but I don't have one, so I'm just going to assign the whole lot to, including these blue ones, all except for the eye controllers, the eye bones here, the eye targets, and hit U and set that to head and hit OK. I'll minus that. Now if I had eyes in here, what I would do is I would assign each one of these bones to the respective eye, but I don't, so I'll just select them all and assign them to their head as well. Okay, now lastly, I'll just bring everything back. We'll do the leg here, and that's leg left. And see, the reason why I put the name of the part first before the what side it's on, so it's easier to find. So leg left, hit OK, grab these two, leg right, minus that, down to the feet. This one's left foot. We didn't do any feet, did we? Never mind. Anyway, we'll just grab all of these and just assign them to the left leg. I'm not really too concerned about how perfect this is, it's more about how you go about assigning them. So leg right. Now we have all the bones in here assigned to the weight maps. Save that. What we now want to do is grab that rig and hit Control X, go to the layer with the mesh and Control V, and now we've got our character setup with a rig, so we'll save that out and we'll send that off to layout to check out the results. So here we are in layout with our character that we just rigged. Now before I go ahead and have a look at some of the controls, I had some major issues when I created this rig. The whole right side, right arm and the right leg just ended up breaking. So I had to rebuild the rig, and what I found was what was actually breaking the rig was the head that I was using. Now I need to point this out so I don't confuse everybody. In the rig parts, in the heads, when we had a look at the heads earlier, I had this head as a far left head, and then we had the other two, so we had 3 heads in there. Now the first head doesn't actually come with the presets. This was a head that I borrowed from one of the complex rigs because of this little bone up here with the parenting. It's not really necessary. So what we do is we just use head number 2 that's got the parenting, and what I did was I just copied this connector here, moved it up here, connected it, and then I welded the parenter to the top of that connector. When I brought it in, it's all working really good. So we'll just have a quick look. We've got the legs are working. Okay. Just want to point out that I'll turn auto key off so that when we make changes and we mess around with the rig, all we do is just move the timeline and it pops back. So it's just a really good way to test out the rig. So there we have it. We've got our rig working. We've got everything moving with all the correct stuff, and we're good to go. We can go ahead and animate. So hopefully by now you've got a much better understanding of the way Genoma works and how to create a rig and all the things you can and can't do with them. So to finish off, inside the content, I've got my two-headed Fred master. That's that character that I animated with the 2 heads. Feel free to let's just take a look. Feel free to load that into layout and check it out and have a bit of a play with it. What I've also done is I've added another character here called Puppet Rigged. Okay, and inside the scenes I've got a puppet, a walk cycle, and also I've got the puppet setup, which is everything ready to go minus the animation, so you can check them out. This is the walk cycle. Now this video has ended up being extremely long, much longer than I anticipated, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a second video where I'm going to be covering some animation and some production workflows. I'll do this walk cycle here. I'll also include a run cycle and an animal walk cycle, and hopefully an animal run cycle or trot, gallop, whatever it's called. So check these out if you like, and in the next video we'll cover some animation. Now if you like, what you can do is you can load my character in here and go over to Skelegons, select them all and just delete them. Maybe save it out as a different object. That would be a good idea. And in the Genoma presets, in the Shoot presets, right down the bottom, we've got 2-head Fred build. What I've done is I've basically just split up the rig that I just deleted, and what you can do is you can just load in each part. If you load in the root first, that'll sit right where it's supposed to sit on the object, and from that point on you can go and select the spines and arms and just join them all together. There's no need to try to fit each joint. As long as you fit each part within the object, it'll match up. All the bones have got all the weight maps associated to them, and we've got all the weight maps in the object. So if you like, you can just go through and add these objects and basically just connect them all together, and you should be able to get a rig, and that'll give you a very good idea of how the process works. Unfortunately, it'll take about an hour and a half to go through that step by step, so have a go at that. And as per usual, I hope it's helped. I'll see you next time.